Hey, welcome back, everyone. Thanks for joining us here on what's a beautiful August day here in Dallas. School here actually starts today. So it's hard to believe summer is actually coming to an end already. But we got a good lineup today. So I think some interesting topics you'll find that'll be very encouraging. Much of it for the health and fitness industry, some good data and statistics we're going to share with you. But before we get into the agenda, I want to toss it over to Blair, who's got something he wants to share with everybody.
Yeah, I've got a little surprise topic here. This is a big congratulations. This is Max Roth. This is Sara's son, playing for Team USA at the Maccabiah Games in Israel last month, or I think it was last month. 21st Maccabiah Games are every 4 years. It's for anybody of the Jewish faith, and they took home the gold medal. Mac was named player of the game. They won the gold medal game 5-1 against Canada, who's named player of the game. And just we just wanted to call out what a neat kid. He lived here in Wenatchee with the general manager of our clubs for a few years, and so we feel like he's kind of part of our family here too. So anyway, wanted to surprise Sara with the congratulations for Max.
Yep, very cool.
That's so nice. It was really cool. We went to, well, it wasn't cool. It was 110 degrees, but we went to Israel, watched them play. There were 10,000 athletes from around the world. It's the the largest athletic event behind the Olympics. So you guys are very sweet. So thank you.
Very nice. Very cool.
Congratulations, Sara and Max. That's awesome.
That is.
Yeah, okay. I'm the best carpooler you ever want to meet.
I'm sure you're on time for sure and prepared.
Always.
As you always would be. All right, Mr. McBride, you're going to lead us off this month, sharing some information and research from ABC Fitness Solutions. They are just everywhere. They're supporting our industry in so many ways, but take it away.
Yeah, we couldn't do the show without ABC sponsorship, and they every week they're putting out new data. And so I've got two things to share quickly before we jump into this slide. One is they did some market research on consumer personas, and we've all heard of personas, and I'm not going to get too much into the nuts and bolts of it. But in their world, they did routine lifers, wellness lover, fitness explorer, and casual consumer. And they surveyed about 1,500 people, mostly active members. And it was interesting, some of the things that came out of it. And I believe that Club Intel might have been involved with this research as well, which are good friends of ours. But what was interesting to me that I just want to highlight before we talk about the membership is active consumers. 71% stated that they wanted to be active as their primary goal. And that was up from 66% last year. And the second thing that was interesting is the bounce of growing interest in maintaining and improving mental health and stress relief by exercise through fitness. So we talk about these a lot in this show, but it's bearing out in the data. Being active, mental wellness. Next up was working out outdoors. That's declined somewhat, but it's still a high priority. I don't think that the rebound is complete with people coming back into the clubs, but we're seeing some increased trends that we're gonna hit on real quickly. The online digital stuff has dropped down significantly since where it was right after COVID, and the recovery stuff with flexibility and stretching still in the top categories. So the things that we've been highlighting are real for the consumer, and ABC's done a lot of research on that. So I just want to put that out there that paying attention to what the consumers are looking at and doing is important, and staying focused on these things. And the mental aspects with regard to the being active aspects are critical. Now, quickly, ABC's data, which is a cross-section of so many clubs around the country, shows a 10% increase from 2019 in their sites with regard to sales. But what was interesting to me was the not only the distribution on this map. You see the West Coast, you see the mountain region, you see the different central, and then we go into Southeast and Northeast. And I'm not going to read you the chart, but you're seeing a growth in membership. What's really interesting is the participation, or the check-in rate, is dwarfing the membership rate as a percentage of growth. So click to the next slide, please. Look at this. This is check-ins by region. And if you think back to, the Pacific was 13.6% in membership, 47.2% check-ins.
And Bill, is that year over year? I'm trying to remember if this was year over year or year. Is this year over year growth?
Yeah, it was growth since 2021, I think.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yep. Midwest was 15%. Our mountain was 15% on membership, 22% check-ins. Central was 12.5 on membership, 20.5 on check-ins. Southeast was 15.6, closer.
Bill?
Is that people are coming back. Go ahead, Blair.
You cut out on us a minute there, Bill.
Your voice cut out on us for a second there.
Sorry about that.
I think what was really interesting here is there was a lot of membership growth in like the Southeast, but the check-ins are low. And yet you look on the West Coast, the check-ins are 47%, but it had almost the lowest membership growth. So it seems like wherever there's a low membership growth, these people are participating more, who's ever a member. But I think it's kind of interesting because California is very slow to remove their masks, whereas Florida, I don't think they kind of ever wore masks.
Yeah, but when we go back to that data, Sara, this is the improvement in check-ins, not the total number of check-ins. So this makes a little bit of sense with regard to the West Coast being slower to get back to it versus the Florida and some of the blue state, red state kind of thing. And I don't care about your politics, but there is a difference between blue state, red state, and how the pandemic was handled regulation-wise and what it trained consumers. And then the last point I want to make on the ABC data, because Brent's got some great stats that go along with that. In their ecosystem, the biggest area of growth was the 1 to 25-year-olds, those under 25 years old. And women had a significantly higher percentage of that population joining. Their next highest was the 26 to 35-year-olds, and that was close to even male and female. But what in ABC's world, the younger people are joining at a higher rate. In pre-pandemic, my experience was we were getting more of the 35 to 70-year-olds. We were getting more of the older people coming in. And I don't know if that's happening in you guys' world, but in their data, it was very surprising to me that the younger people were the highest proportion of new members.
Yeah, no, I think that trend has translated across a bunch of different research studies that I've seen, Bill. The younger population is coming back definitely much faster. I think there was a segment of the mature population that stuck with us all through the pandemic. And there's a certain segment of that didn't, and they're still not back, right?
Yeah. And I'm so...
I know.
Sorry, Blair, go ahead.
I know we need to move on, but I sent that report to my team, and they said this is exactly what we're seeing in our clubs. We've never had so many young people. We had a core group of the older that stayed with us the whole time, and now finally they're saying we're just starting to see the rest of them trickle back in.
Yeah. And I've heard the same thing, especially in the Midwest. I think women are coming back quicker. I think they're just ready to get out of the house and sick of homeschooling the kids.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I just love what ABC does on the research, as well as Club Intel and IHRSA and all these other groups. But well, finally, I got something right. Sounds like you kind of agree for a change with me.
Well, we
Barely.
agree with ABC Fitness Solutions.
Oh,
Let's
yeah,
make
yeah,
it clear.
I got confused there. Sorry. Yeah.
All right, Sarah, transition us to recruiting talent.
Okay, recruiting talent. We've got a video for you guys to watch as usual. I found this to be really great stuff because we've been hiring people because during the pandemic, you end up losing staff. So in looking for it, the main thing that I saw is you need to sell your company. You don't need to, the client who, pardon me, the applicant does not really focus on selling themselves. You've got to sell your company, and you better act quickly because good people are being snapped up. And what I thought was interesting, I have a friend that's doing this in their club and doing it very effectively, that what they had is they had their own staff really reaching out to their friends that they thought would make good team members. And the staff never wants to hire someone who's rotten, so they really push with their friends. And what the clubs have done is they've incentivized their own staff. They say, if you can find us someone that will apply, you get $50. And if they actually show up for the interview, they get another $50. And then if they take the job, they get the final $50 totaling $150. So they've really incentivized this, and I thought that was very effective. And in the interview process, to try to sell the company, like when we're hiring people, we have our staff actually interviewing / selling our company to the applicant. And that way, the applicant figures out, am I really going to fit in here? Am I really going to enjoy this job? Because you do not want to hire someone that you fire 3 months later, okay? You want to be very cautious. And in your offer letters, I highly, highly recommend you give yourself 90 days and not 30 days to evaluate that person. So what do you guys think?
Well, I want to jump on the employee rewards program because we were discussing that with some of my roundtables recently, Sarah. And what we discovered was in our industry, in the health and fitness industry, my clubs in the past, when I owned them, I would do the same. I'd pay $75, and that's sort of the realm, $50 to $75 for employee referrals. Outside our industry, the businesses are paying thousands. And so if we really want to get serious, we need to increase the value of that. It's not $50
exactly,
more, it's more.
Brent, it's exactly where I was going. When I was at Medallia, we paid if you referred somebody that came in and on the engineering team, on the product team, you got $5,000.
Yeah,
we hired them. And other positions were $2,500, I think was the lowest. And they did all-day training that every staff member went through on how to interview, because everybody had to be involved in interviewing, and also how to recruit. So it's interesting, right? Because if you look at some companies out there in our industry that are fast growing, they're the ones that have to get this right a lot more than those of us that, lose an employee here and there. It's less about recruiting and just sort of having a source, right? A source to go find another trainer, a source to go find another front desk person.
And this was just to help find somebody to come in and interview. So what they did is they made a very strong signing bonus, like that $2,500 signing bonus. And possibly, I think what you guys are saying, which is really key, that if they do take that job, that we give the employee maybe a second signing bonus.
Yep. Well, they get the incentive for referring the person in that got hired. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be great. Bill, what are they doing with active wellness?
Well, I mean, we've done referral campaigns where if you refer somebody, you get, up to $250 and things like that. If we did, $2,500, $5,000 on, just call it full-time positions, we'd probably be out of business, based on 53 sites. So I think, you've got to look at part-time, you've got to look at the what you're going to do to realistically aid in turnover. If you have a college student coming and they're only going to be here 9 months, so you just got to think it through, because we're in a different industry. I mean, in my world, a third of my employees are full-time, 2/3 are part-time, something of that mix. And so you just have to think that through a bit. But I'm all about, we do 3 interviews. Any manager above, I interview the final interview before they come on board, regardless of where they are in the country. And that extra step goes a long way when they're talking to somebody that's C-level in an organization and they're, a 23-year-old full-time supervisor. That's a different experience than some organizations. So, it's a relationship.
I think it really depends on that position too. If you're hiring a very high value position that you expect them to come in and grow a personal training department or something where they're going to generate a lot of revenue, that probably has a higher bounty,
Right.
than some of the frontline positions in that. You just put different bounties on those different roles. Yeah.
And we were looking at, where do we post? Do we pay LinkedIn? Do we do Indeed? Do we do,
Yeah.
And we found the site workable to do very well for us. It was reasonable and it went way across the board. So if you guys are looking for talent, that's one resource.
Did you say workable?
Workable.
And for what position, Sarah?
For us, it was a directorship position. So it posts automatically it posts on Indeed, et cetera. So it's really nice. It goes across the boards and posts on all the sites.
Well, I mean, one final comment on that, just because it's so important. And Sarah, you hit it beautifully. This is not you selling them or them selling you. This is it a good fit for both of you? And it's like meeting somebody that you're going to date, right? It's like, do we see eye to eye? Are we aligned? Do we get along? Is this worth going forward in the relationship? And looking at it that way, as a relationship, we're all relationship people, is the key there.
Right. Yep. Thanks, Bill. All right. So the next topic is offline exercise and back. And this really ties into the information that Bill shared to kick us off from ABC Fitness Solutions. It's a little bit different. ABC Fitness Solutions, of course, is showing a sampling of all the sites that they represent, which they have intimate knowledge about. This is from Placer AI, and it was very current. It was published in July, just this last month. And it was talking about the return of what they called, which I thought was interesting, offline fitness. And of course, the article starts and talks a little bit about how virtual fitness was predicted to really be the next frontier in health and wellness. And to a degree, as the article points out, that's true, right? The role of digital, the role of connected fitness is clearly growing. We saw evidence of AI at the IHRSA convention and trade show all over. However, the negative impact that was predicted about sort of the doom and gloom about brick and mortar facilities really hadn't panned out. They're coming back really strong. And here's a sampling of some of their research. And Blair, I know you'd asked this question, so it's right there at the top. This is year over 3-year comparison. And if you look across, you can see that out here at the end in June of 2022, the foot traffic, right? The change in monthly visits to gyms is up 26.2% over 3 years ago. That's a pretty strong indicator about the return of people coming back to the gym. Another interesting thing they said, which I thought the audience would enjoy, was they talked about inflation and how we're experiencing this really tremendous inflation. In June, it was 9.1% on a national average, and how that actually might be helping clubs, which is something we may not have considered. And the rationale was that inflation is causing people to cut back on maybe some of the other things experientially they might be interested in, but people still want that sense of community, that sense of connection, as Sarah's pointed out multiple times, getting out of the house and being around some other adult people is an experience they're wanting. And that's what gyms represent at a pretty nominal cost comparatively. This is another slide, and this is across different market sectors, which I thought really drove home the point. So hopefully you can see this. The purple on the left is what grocers have experienced over this same period from October of 21 to June of 22. Then you have the superstores, right? The Targets, the Walmarts, et cetera. Then you have the fast food and QSR entities, and then you have fitness. And as you can see, as you look across, especially out here at the end, all those others are relatively flat. Fast food is actually on the decline in June, and fitness is skyrocketing as far as foot traffic goes. And they're tracking, again, some of the same clubs that ABC Fitness Solutions is tracking, but they're also very much tied into the larger change, the Crunch, the Planets, the 24-hour, the Anytime. So it's really been encouraging. And of course, it's good to see. We all hope through the pandemic that all the doom and gloom and predictions about brick and mortar clubs never coming back to what they were wouldn't be true. And it's nice to see that that's indeed, how it's panning out. Two other quick points that I didn't show in graph format that they found that I know all of you are probably experiencing in your clubs as well, is that the frequency of visits is up. So members are visiting more frequently than they did pre-pandemic. The duration of their visits is higher than it was pre-pandemic. And there's been a shift in the time of day that they're attending the clubs more toward the evening. So people have discovered a more flexible schedule due to remote work, et cetera. And that early morning crowd that we all know and love that's just so consistent has diminished a little bit. And there's been a shift throughout the day, but particularly in the evening. So with that, I'll throw it over and see if you guys kind of agree with that research. I mean, it's pretty enlightening.
Yeah, it's one thing that's interesting is that the foot traffic being up almost 30%, 26, 27% is about the percentage of clubs that closed permanently, right? I mean, right. So I'm wondering, how much of this foot traffic is increased in the remaining clubs from the ones that, closed.
Yeah, that they cleaned up. Unfortunately, some of the facilities that financially couldn't survive, and the additional members are floating there. I also think we always used to talk about the 1920s, that everything was going to come back after the pandemic with a roar. And it feels like a little bit of a whimper, but this is good news, Brent, what you're sharing. And I still wonder if maybe it's the participation of people in the gym rather than just pure membership growth. Because I think with inflation, leisure businesses typically decline. But I find it very interesting that what you're saying is they're not declining. They just don't have enough money to go anyplace else.
Yeah.
Well, and the other point they made, Sarah, which helps answer your thought about leisure expenditures tend to go down, is that people through the pandemic, and we've heard this over and over and over, have reprioritized their value about health and fitness, right? So however they consider wellness in their mind, it was really imprinted upon them through the pandemic that there's a high value of that, not just for looking good and feeling better, but also for immunity, for mental health, all the things we talk about. So they extolled those virtues in that article as well as part of their rationale.
Right.
Well,
go ahead, Bill.
Well, I was just going to say, I'm just looking at the ABC data. 4 out of the 5 regions were right at the 22, 18, 2020, right along with your 22% foot traffic. So, everything's tying together from different sources, including Blair's point about closures. Like, there is more demand for the existing boxes.
Yeah.
And
right on.
And the after the 20s, the roaring 20s, it took a while. Like it took several years after the pandemic.
2 years, yeah.
Yeah. So that'll take us into this next topic. Actually, weaves in nicely about what's happening right now with record stress. So, and I think Emily, we've got a slide there for that. Yeah. So this is Gallup every year since 2006, they poll 150,000 people in 122 countries, and they create a sadness index and a happiness index. And on the top, what you're seeing here is the sadness index, and on the bottom, the happiness index. You'll notice from 2018 to 2019, it was flat. And then the pandemic hits, and that sadness index has been going up consistently. Then you look down at the happiness index. It's the first time it's dropped this low in a very long time. Okay. So what they do is they ask 5 questions, 150,000 people, and they say, in the last day, have you felt stress, worry, sadness, physical pain, or anger?
Yes.
And 4 of them are, oh, go ahead, Bill.
I said yes.
Oh, yeah, yes. And 4 of those are up significantly. 1 is down 2 points, and that's anger. On the happiness index, they ask, are you well rested? And then specifically, have you had a lot of enjoyment, not just enjoyment, smiled or laughed a lot, felt treated with respect, or learned something interesting? And that's how they create the indexes. Now, isn't there that when I was going through this, and especially the ones on the positive side, I'm thinking, about employees, right? How do we help them here? The main drivers of this, and I'll turn it over to you guys. Main drivers to this is poverty, weak social connections or community, hunger, loneliness, lack of good work. Those are the main ones.
Great.
Yeah, it's, I look at this and I say, I always remember suicide is the leading cause of death in the United States. There were about 46,000 deaths in 2020. This is one death every 11 minutes, and it's horrific. It's just horrific the effects of the pandemic. But Blair, do you think we're coming out of it?
I don't know. It feels like, it took a while in the 20s to come out of it. And it feels like this can't just keep going down. But then, you got this war in Ukraine going on. You've got, still, threats from China, and all that stuff just kind of has this, it's like having fluorescent lights that buzz all the time, right? I mean, they just kind of cause a certain stress level. They said in this that 333 million adults worldwide will spend 2 weeks without ever talking to a family or friend.
Sarah, you said suicide was the #1 cause of death in the United States. That's you're talking about in certain categories, right? Like
right.
Youth. I know the military and youth, we're seeing such high peaks. It's completely out of control.
Yeah, I want to make one comment about, because this is from Gallup also. I was just doing some research for an article I'm writing about recruiting and talent. And Gallup was saying one of the #1 things people are looking for in the workplace is what they're now terming career well-being. And that if you're a manager, a boss, supervisor, or however you want to phrase that, one of the best things you can possibly do for employee retention and longevity is just make sure they know that you care about their well-being as an individual. And so you can do the recognition programs, you can do the incentive plans, the bonuses, all sorts of things that we all know we need to include, but they really want to know at the end of the day that you care about them as an individual, really.
Emily, do you mind removing the slide? Oh, thanks. And it's, I gotta tell you, it's hard for the CEO, for the C-suite people to say, we're under financial stress right now, and yet we've got to be nicer to our staff. So it's hard. I mean, for you, for the owners and managers out there, it's a struggle. But I think it's a very worthwhile struggle to make your staff feel like they're part of your family in your gym.
I think it's real, especially, if you're thinking about kind of this global sadness, and we've seen some of the stuff in our clubs. I think all of us have seen stuff in our clubs, that the interactions with members, sometimes they're like, who put it this way, that it's been a little more God, somebody from one of our customers used a great word, but like harsh, a little more harsh. I was talking to at Fit Life last week. I was talking to Lila Reed from Mount Hood Athletic Club. We're talking about this topic, and she put all of her staff in shirts that said "Kindness matters," and she said it helped though quite a bit. So,
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to diverge too far off it, but you know, we talked about active shooter in schools and just active shooting in general. And it fits right along with this global sadness indicator, and people not being kind to each other. And, you know, it causes mentally unstable people to react to being rejected and not treated well, and so on and so on. So being kind to everybody has so many benefits, you know, for others as well as yourself.
Yeah, exactly, Bill. Well said. Okay. Sarah, I believe this one is yours. Small business funding.
Small business funding. Here we go. Here we go with the video. There's 8 options for small business funding. That's great. Thank you. I also want to thank Emily. This is her first time running the talk show, and she's doing a great job. So thank you for doing that. I thought this was, I liked seeing that there's 8 different options out there for you to get funding for your business. I thought the first frame was actually the most, I don't know, I want to say almost upsetting. 18.4% of the U.S. businesses fail within the first year. 20% fail. And then we've got almost 50% fail after 5 years, and then over 65% fail after 10 years. But I'm looking at that 20% and that 50% in the early years, and it's just from lack of funding. So planning, we used to plan our businesses to say, I need enough money just to last a year. And I don't think it's a year. I think you need enough money to last 5 years. And one of the things that when I was reading this article, I got it out of New York Times. One of the things I thought were missing was, you know, opening up your mouth sometimes and asking members if they're interested in funding, because they're your biggest advocates, and hopefully some of them, especially some of your wealthier personal training clients, you can do some trading with and get some serious funding because they believe in you and they believe in what you do. And as business owners, sometimes we open a gym because we were the best trainer, we were the best instructor. And I'm talking independents and I'm talking boutiques, I'm not talking a lot of franchises here, but it's very rewarding if you can take that skill set and try to very effectively hone your business skills. And not just your skills in teaching or training, but the skills that actually come from running a business.
Well, I agree with your lack of funding is one of the causes, but I would go back further. It's lack of planning on how much funding you're going to need, right? We're over optimistic in our revenue, and we tend to be over aggressive in thinking we can do it cheaper on our expenses. And so a lot of that is failure to plan appropriately. But you're right. I put members in the friends and family category, right? I mean, they're people you know, they're people that like you have a relationship with. My only advice on funding is avoid personal guarantees as an independent opening your first site with all the might in the world. More people have gone under on personal guarantees. And if you're going to do a personal guarantee, make sure you've
done that planning and have the funding.
And the thing to really check also is your lease, because that's where you're always getting that personal guarantee. And that's the biggest fight. That's the biggest fight usually people have. Sorry, Brent, go ahead.
No, I was just making fun of Bill because he said that's his only recommendation about funding. I know it's not true. He's got a list.
Yeah. But it's highly unlikely that most of those sources are going to allow you to not do a personal guarantee unless you're of a certain size.
Well, but when you have to do it, you can do certain caveats a lot of times where it goes away at a certain point, or it's up to a certain amount at a certain point.
Yeah.
There's and right now, Blair, people are a little bit in different places. Landlords, there's a lot more vacancy, and there is some ability, and especially if you're doing percent rent deals and so forth. But
but if you're talking about like SBA loans and that, you're going to have to personal guarantee and probably collateralize. And then there's a lot of the fintech companies out there have just exploded. I mean, they're out there actively trying to, lend money, and they'll do stuff without a personal guarantee and no collateral, but you're going to pay a really high interest rate on that part of it.
And it's hard to read that small print. Literally, the font size is like a 5. So you can't read it anyway, and it's just kind of scary. And one of the recommendations is, all you gentlemen, you guys are working with Rex Roundtable. Get yourself on some type of roundtable. Find a club owner somewhere. Go to IHRSA, find another club owner. Maybe they're in a different state than you are, at least a different parameter. And people are nice. I think a lot of times we're all in this together has, thank goodness, lasted a bit longer since the pandemic, and people will help you. Other club owners might help you review your lease or review your loan documents for purchasing equipment.
Yeah, good suggestion, Sarah, for sure. I think you're right. Absolutely. All right, gamification part 1.
All right, I'll take it. And I think we've got a video there. Okay, so I'm going to kind of juxtapose different gamification. I've got a slide here. So we did a project with MyZone, MXM. We did a project with MyZone. We pulled records on 63,000 members and shared the de-identified information with MyZone. They were able to go into the clubs that we had, like clubs, and then look at the difference between the MyZone where and the non-MyZone where. So here's some of the findings. Okay, the way the numbers work here is on just like Net Promoter Score. You see in the bottom there, the bottom right, MyZone users have a 9-point higher Net Promoter Score. So think of all these scores as net scores. A net score goes from -100 to +100. That's what you need to know about a net score. That's how these are scored. More likely to be a member in 6 months by 14 points. I can tell you these are significant differences. And so this is gamification too. 10 points higher on fitness results, on how they perceive their fitness results. This one was really interesting. The people that have 4 connections or more perform 41% more activity. So the gamification we saw with the Supernatural and Oculus is one way to gamify, but this is also gamification, right? You're getting awards as you go, you're making connections. Part of it is just, getting to a certain heart rate zone for a certain amount of time, and, then trying to get it back down quickly to another zone. And that's gamification also. But I'm going to add
Hey,
this.
Blair.
Yes.
Hey, Blair. For
Yeah.
those that aren't familiar with MyZone, what is the definition of a connections? Is that other individuals or what?
Correct. It's other individuals, right? So you can just, if I look you up on there and say, I want to connect, you can connect with me, and then we can see each other's workouts. And then you can also sort through everybody that you connect with and see how you rank with everybody for that month or year or whatever. Yep. So, and people, give you high fives or whatever, talk to you about your workout. You can post pictures on there. So it's a social part of it. It's a social part of MyZone. I'll throw this out there too. Isn't the rapid growth in pickleball sort of gamifying fitness as well? Right? I mean,
it's really interesting. Emily, do you mind taking the screen down? Because I find it fascinating that they're also doing fitness programs based on strength training and flexibility training for pickleball players. It is huge. And then also personal trainers are documenting that they're training people doing small group training effectively for pickleball players. And I think you're right, Blair. I think gamification includes a game. And there's a new set out there. I can't remember the name of the company, and if I find it, I'll throw it in the chat box. But what they've done is they've taken a group exercise studio, an aerobic studio, and they have a net you can put up, and it comes with 4 paddles, and it comes with a bunch of balls, and it's a whole set that you can set up in your club to run pickleball. And oh my God, I heard about this from like 10 people at the last Mania convention in Atlanta, where they bought this set and they run it like at 10:30, right after the biggest, morning class, and from 10:30 till about 4:30 in the afternoon, that court is booked up, and they're making ancillary revenue in the clubs.
So at this point about gamification and pickleball, right? Because pickleball has attracted a lot of people that maybe won't do something more intense, let's say, right? And if you look at the Oculus and that quote that was right in the middle there, the Supernatural saved my life. I've never exercised and now I exercise. If you think about pulling people along from being, inactive to exercising, like MyZone is people in gyms working out. That's different than trying to get people. Like I'm not sure I'd use MyZone to try to attract people to exercise, but it's people that decide to exercise and choose MyZone. And then you've got this other, like, how do we use that gamification to get more people into the industry? And I think looking at this Supernatural and then just thinking about pickleball, I think they're both doing that. Maybe there's other ways.
Yeah, I think there is. I think with MyZone too, not to diminish, the upside to people that are using MyZone, I think it's a little bit self-selecting, right? People that are really into their fitness, they want to track their fitness, they're very active, they tend to be more frequently the MyZone users, right? To reinforce those behaviors.
I'll say this, it depends on whether and I don't mean this to be, they'll be happy about it. I didn't mean this to be a MyZone, deal, but it depends on whether you bring MyZone in as a strategy or a tactic. If you bring it in as a strategy tied to, this is sort of how we do business, then people are talking about it, the trainers are using it there, and it just becomes a part of the way you do it.
Yeah. And when it first started, when gamification first started in the clubs, the instructors and the trainers rejected it. They still were screaming out, "Give me your heart rate." And unless you go after those trainers and those instructors to get them to embrace it and they're not threatened by it, you're not going to have effectiveness.
Yeah, but it goes back. Remember Espresso bikes, and they're still around, and we have them in our locations. And remember the rower where your boat was chasing the other boat, while you were, so gamification has been around. And isn't gamification the same as sport in some ways? Like all sport is a game. And so you have pickleball fitting right into that mix. And you're looking at all these things and looking at it from to your point about MyZone. If you introduce beginners to MyZone, it's the great equalizer. Heart rate's a great equalizer for everyone.
Yeah.
You work against yourself at a certain level, so it can be, if you have it strategically involved versus a tactic of just having self-selection, which it happens both ways in locations. Yeah, it's a very, very interesting topic. We're going to bring back next month gamification 2, right?
Yep.
Oh, and I did find the company. It's called
That's another 40.
Snap Sports, and it's one word for the pickleball courts for indoor.
We put it in the chat.
Yes, yes, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. McBride.
Yeah, I saw an article in Inc. magazine, and we'll make the link available to you in the chat or in the notes. But the title was "The Lifestyle Brand is Dead and Long Live the Lifestyle Brand." You know, going back and forth. And one of the examples was Victoria's Secret. You know, they had this pink dog as a backstory, and you know, their name recognition is off the chart. Their attention to detail. You know, I think their next competitor that they talk about is Third Love, which is in the millions, and you know, Victoria's Secret's in the billions. And so, you know, it's interesting how their approach as an old brand, you know, an old brand now, versus a Ralph Lauren, you know, which was exclusive, old money, a little bit more stodgy. It's talking about these powerful brands and what's happening in the universe now. It no longer works to paper people with direct mail and flyers and do that exclusivity thing and almost snobby appeal. You know, consumers don't want that now based on the article. You know, they want people that are caring about the environment, caring about society, caring about doing good, that meet customers where they are. And the article finished up with, you know, the customer is the queen or king, and the brand needs to serve that king or queen, and you need to have a real backstory on your brand, not just hype, but why it is what it is. And so it left with 4 points, and then I'm gonna throw it up to my colleagues. Delve into where your product meets audience desire. You know, go to where your audience is and meet them with a real value proposition and where they are. Don't aim for flawlessness or manufacturer insecurity. So you don't have to be perfect, but you've got to be great and striving for improvement, and you got to be constantly showing that improvement. It suggests to create a movie worthy of a cinema. So when you do video, it talks about Zendesk and what they did. You know, have the full plot to your story. You know, what's the beginning, what's the middle, where's the journey? You know, build it into a cinematic journey, and then obviously just to welcome and include people that are like-minded and that you're trying to reach versus exclusive. So some of it seems kind of basic, but it is a paramount, a very big shift in old school advertising versus brand positioning and really connecting with your consumers. And I just thought the article was really worthwhile for sales, marketing, positioning, service. You know, it's only 4 pages. It's a short read, but I think you could make a really good meeting out of it with your teams.
And I think the biggest influence is actually social media, because I know you said, you know, make it cinematographic. They don't mean make it cinematographic like, oh, it's got to be beautiful and it's got to flow from, you know, have a whole frame on the way it's going to be designed, and you need professional cinematographers. It just needs to have a plot, a beginning, middle, and an end. And those stories on Instagram and Facebook really work. And audiences, you know, I agree with this article. I think audiences want to see the person, and they want to know what's going on behind the scenes, because they're going to figure it on their own. They're going to find your Facebook. They're going to find your Instagram. So I think that's interesting, and I think that honesty, I'm sorry, I'm going on here, but remember that Abercrombie and Fitch that were sued because they specifically chose they wanted only young white people in their ads. And it didn't kill their brand, but that lawsuit financially just about killed them. And we're getting much more inclusive and diverse. And I think that's part of this, what this article was addressing.
Yeah, I think that, yeah, I totally agree. And it just goes back to some of the stuff we've talked about in the past about just being authenticity and humanizing your brand more and more. And there's a line in this article that actually had me think of Abercrombie and Fitch when they Abercrombie and Fitch used to be more like Eddie Bauer. And then they switched and they went with this super young, try to be real hip. And there's this line in here that says, showing off and even giving the cold shoulder to customers. That used to be, you know, they're saying what's unfashionable, but aloof superiority is decidedly unfashionable in a changing society focused on inclusivity, self-acceptance, and breaking down social hierarchies. Okay. This speaks so much to just being authentic. This speaks to doing videos where a trainer tells their backstory. So the backstory of your company is going to be backstory of a lot of the people that you've had on your team for a long time. From I had a great conversation with our GM yesterday about do we adopt like an animal for like as part of our brand, right?
Mascot.
A mascot. That's what I'm looking for. A mascot. We had a great conversation about it yesterday. I got laughing so hard about how she was thinking about it, but it was fun.
Well, yeah, and one of the things in the article was don't go after the unattainable aspirational image only. You go with, realism and an actual brand promise that is authentic. And it's that story arc you were talking about. It doesn't have to be cinematic in production, but it has to have a story arc.
And I think this leads perfectly into what SoulCycle did very aggressively with their branding. And we have a video that SoulCycle actually put on their Facebook and Instagram pages.
When I come through, everybody done know. Keep my footwork, everybody front row. Bounce. Bounce. Bounce.
Take a deep breath. We've got this.
Bounce on it swift, bounce on it lit. Show 'em how you bounce with the split, bounce with the trick. Bounce it down really quick. Then make it dip. Bounce it down, bust 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 it down.
You ready?
Now, that's a little scary. Like the last slide is very, very aggressive. And that was pointed directly to what went on with SoulCycle set up as a campaign to go after Peloton. So what they did was they poked fun at Peloton having excess inventory, which we know after the pandemic started lifting, of course Peloton's going to have some extra bikes. What SoulCycle offered was 47 free classes. You get a free classes for the value of your Peloton bike. And they did this for their first 100 people. So if you brought your bike back into SoulCycle, they would actually ask you to trade in the bikes, and they gave you the equivalent value, which is what, you're talking $1,000 to $2,000 for these bikes, in free classes, which is kind of crazy. And the thing you had to do was live within 20 minutes of a SoulCycle, not have taken a class since March 16th, 2020, and be the first SoulCycle goer. So if you've already, let's say you already were a member, but you just didn't go back since 2020, you could go back. Or a first timer could do this, trade in their bike, and it had to be a Peloton bike. Now, of course, they picked Peloton because it's the biggest bike name out there, and it's a wonderful product. But they went aggressively after it. And what I thought was really interesting with the social media, I went right on and watched the video and looked at this. 9 out of 10 people who responded, who put comments in the field, were negative. They said, you want me to train in my ability to ride every single day as many times as I want for less than 50 classes? Are you high? And then somebody asked, how many classes can I get with a 1984 recumbent bike? And several people wrote, this is just sad. So somebody said, SoulCycle is desperate to get cool again. Only one person I read said, I'm ready to get back in the studio. So I think there's a broader statement here. You look at this, and Madonna used to say, no publicity is bad publicity. And Mick Jagger actually said, if everybody likes me, then I'm definitely doing something wrong. So I look and I'm like, how should we as club owners get as much publicity and as much attention as we can? Because tens of thousands of people watched this video and read this posting. Is even this negative publicity good?
Yeah, I don't know. This is interesting. Some great comments comments here in the chat, by the way. It is interesting, like the person, the first negative comment that you read back. I have a Peloton. I think I have almost 1,800 rides or something like that. And so if you don't equate like 47. I have 1,800 rides on, right? Like, it doesn't seem like much. I wonder how successful that campaign was and how they measured success for that campaign. Maybe they were just looking for these. Go ahead, Bill.
I struggle with, I'm not SoulCycle's audience. Like, that ad turns me off. It seems exclusive to a certain type of person. It doesn't seem in the wellness sphere that I'm operating in, with, people of all shapes and sizes and ages and so on. So that's not me. That doesn't resonate with me. But you've got to respect the power of that brand and who they go after and how they do that. But in the comments, I hate the either or. Most people that regular exercise have both, or some form of both. Not necessarily Peloton and a studio, but have a facility and home equipment of some sort.
And clubs have a Peloton in their clubs. All the clubs have Peloton so that people can ride whenever they want to. And we go back to look at what Blair did with the Gamify. Pretty soon we're going to have a room that has all this electronic equipment so we can do virtual training in the gym.
Yeah, I just don't know that this kind of ad helps our industry in a global space, in a wellness space.
Right. I think Diana Risley said that exact same thing in the comments, right? Like, if we want to attract more and more people in the industry, we got to not be throwing each other under the bus, right? And pointing at that brand and saying it's bad. And, I completely agree with that. Yeah.
Although if you're going to throw somebody under the bus, Peloton's a good choice, given how their CEO really railed on the whole health and fitness industry before he was let go. Not that I remember such a thing, but I just remember his.
Now they're part of a bigger brand with.
Remember now, though, that about Precor and how much help they've done for our industry. Right.
Precor.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is not a dig on Precor.
No way. Those are our good friends over there. All right. So even the dog doesn't agree with that statement. Right. So I wanted to share this report, which was produced by IHRSA in combination with the Global Health and Fitness Alliance that IHRSA helped form. And they hired Deloitte to do this study. And it's one of the broadest studies that's been done in our industry. And specifically, it's about the health and societal well-being, and to sort of put some quantification around the impact it's having on the health and fitness sector related to GDP, the economic and socioeconomic impact of our health and fitness industry around the world. So in the report, there's 46 countries that participated, countries and regions, I should say. And those that participate account for over 90% of the global GDP from the health and fitness industry in total. So it's a great representation, again, 90% of the total. And here's just a few of their findings that give you some feedback. If you go to the next slide there. Here's some of the information that I wanted to share. I just picked a couple of slides out, but you can access this report and get this information for yourself. I'd highly encourage you to read it, particularly if you're listening from an international location. It's broken out. I think the whole report is actually like 230 pages long. I'm not kidding, because it breaks each country out with several pages and gives these metrics on that specific country. So it's quite long, but you can go to your specific country and get the data. So this particular slide shows sort of the cost of inactivity as a percent of the total GDP in selected countries. So you see over here on the far left is France, and then it goes across to the next to the last one there on the right, which is the United States. And no surprise, we know the US is very inactive and overall, on average, very unhealthy as well. So you can see that the inactivity cost as a percentages of the GDP is extremely high in the US as it is in Brazil. But the healthcare cost of inactivity are relatively low, if you want to call it that, in most of the other developed countries and regions, but in the US, it's all the way up there in that approximately huge range. You see the dot there at the top of the United States bar representing that marker. Okay, go to the next slide. This gives you a little bit of the overall feedback. Again, these are numbers we don't often look at or share within our industry because it tends to skew more toward, healthcare and the economic impact. But that's part of what this study was all about, was trying to help us justify and validate the value of the health and fitness industry in the economy. And that's one of the reasons we didn't get deemed essential when the pandemic first started, because at least we all feel there's really a lack of understanding and appreciation for what the health and fitness sector contributed, not only to the global GDP, but also the value it brings in creating jobs, not only for those that work in the health and fitness centers, but the ancillary indirect jobs it creates for the suppliers, the manufacturers, the suppliers that all support our industry. And these are really big numbers that really help validate, again, how important our industry is when you think about it just from a socioeconomic and economic standpoint. Do we have one more slide there, Emily, to share as well? Maybe this was the last slide, but what they found in the end was that for developed countries, if you would just spend as a government $2,000 to invest in helping the inactive become active, the return on that investment would take place within 1 year. And the benefits of that would obviously continue on into the future. So it was a really good report. If you haven't read it, I would highly encourage it. Again, it was a landmark, a huge study. Killian Fisher helped lead that effort along with the Global Health and Fitness Alliance and the Advisory Council that was started back in 2020. They're doing some great things. And the impetus for developing this, again, was to support not only the United States, but countries around the world as they deal with their political groups and the financial markets, to really educate them about our industry, how big that industry is, and what an important role it plays, even on when you talk about gross domestic product.
Hey, Brent, can that report, can we share that link here, or do they have to go and do something to get it on the IHRSA site?
I think they put it on the chat, in the chat right now.
Okay.
Yeah. Looks like there's a link there. You can access that. Yeah.
I found those numbers really interesting, Brent. And one of the things that I thought about is it freaked me out when I saw that dot being so high as to the cost of healthcare in the United States. Part of it, I started thinking about national health care that Europe has and Canada, et cetera, that the government does pay for a lot of the medical care, and they refuse to pay for a lot of the medical care. So maybe that's why it looks so much lower in other countries. But I thought it's a terrifying number for what this is going to cost us. And I looked at grants that are out there that can fund programs. And there's a lot more grants now that are out there that'll fund fitness programs to help, like with active agers. So I thought that was interesting. That's something that might be brought up to health clubs, that if you offer this type of programming. But it's terrifying what this is going to cost us. And it's not us that are going to pay for it. It's our kids.
Yeah. Hey, Emily, can you see, I think we had a slide, if I'm not mistaken, about the penetration rates in the different countries. If we do have that, if you could pull that up, I think people would really find that interesting. But yeah, you're right, Sara. Bill, you have a take on that report? I know you were really helpful, as all of you on the call were when I was at IHRSA developing some of this research. Oh, there you go. Perfect. So this slide actually shows the market penetration rate in the different countries, and then the market size, which is represented by the bubble of the selected countries and regions. So you can see Sweden still leads the pack as far as penetration, meaning the people over the age of 15 that are members of health clubs, they're up there around that 35% mark. They're one of the best. And then you can see down here at the bottom, you've got Thailand and Japan, which are, 5% or below, along with China. So if you kind of want to know in the United States how we're faring as far as penetration rate goes, Sweden's still leading the pack. We got a little ways to go to catch them. Thank you, man. I appreciate that.
That's been about 3 or 4 years that Sweden's overtaken us. Historically, we were number one in that category. And, I think you look at this thing and it goes back to, what we talked about. We got to look at ourselves as part of the wellness space, not just the exercise fitness space. And, when you start looking at these healthcare numbers, it's insane. And the ROI, I mean, how much money did the government give out in tax credits and, over the pandemic? I mean, $2,000 for every inactive person with an ROI in 1 year and lifelong benefit. I mean, that's a hell of an investment. Sounds like a hell of an opportunity.
Yeah. It does. It does. No doubt about it.
Yeah.
Right. So Bill, did you keep up a list, a running list as usual? So
I do, but
takeaways, highlights.
I do, but a lot of the day was about statistics and reports. So I'm going to be brief. We started out talking about ABC's data, and then that tied right into to Brent's data on foot traffic. 22%, 20% plus coming back. Sales are trending up. We're looking good. In between me and Brent, Sara took us through recruiting talent and how important that is to look at it from, hey, I got to tell you why you want to work here versus you always just telling me why I should hire you. And Sara kind of flipped that paradigm for us and talked about the relationship aspect. Blair jumped in about Gallup, the global sadness index. I acknowledge that, yes, I have all of those sadness traits in the last week. And Brent kind of brought up the career well-being, how you look at your career with regard to enhancing the wellness. So Sara, that was great. Blair, that was a great topic on talking about happiness dipping. Sara talked about small business funding and not forgetting to tap your members, looking at all the sources. We got into a little debate if you can not do personal guarantees or not. I say try not to, but you might have to. Make sure you've got your plan straight. Sara gave us some good options there with the 8 sources. Blair talked about gamification. The results on MyZone and the research that Blair did was unbelievable. 9 points higher on MPS, increased results, increased likelihood of being a member. 4+ connections with anybody completely increases it. We got some chats that the future is all pickleball. I think pickleball is growing and going to be a big thing to look at. And we talked about the gamification aspects of that. I talked about the lifestyle brands. We got into story arc and honesty and authenticity. Great article. Suggest you read it. Sara gave us very powerful, very clear video on SoulCycle and their approach with the Peloton campaign. Very interesting how that approach was. I'd love to see the results of that in some kind of statistical way. That'd be great if somebody could ever find how that all worked out. Brent took us through this Deloitte study, which was just, everybody should read it. The documents we've referenced today are really good reads with your teams. Great opportunity. But he took us through the Deloitte. I won't repeat everything he said because we just ended on that note. But the value of health and fitness in the economy is pretty significant and important. There you go.
Yeah. Thank you, Bill. So 2 things I want to comment on real quick. Number one, Blair, I think Blair is like in the Hall of Fame for MyZone or something for your MEPs. Don't you have the record number of MEPs or something like that, Blair?
Well, I'm 27. I forget how many days in a row. It's been over 5 years without missing a single day, and I'm at some high level in Hall of Fame, evidently. Yeah.
Yeah, congratulations. Not quite what Max accomplished,
I know, I was thinking, I'm going to give Blair a little flag and a gold medal.
Yeah.
And then just to play this up a little bit more, Bill, and I appreciate that, about Deloitte, the research. Killian Fisher really, drove that project, but it really was an outcome of the Global Health and Fitness Alliance, which is an international association that really put this funding together to get that many countries to not only be involved, but contribute financially. I won't share the dollar figure that it cost to have Deloitte help produce that report and do the research, but it was really significant. So indeed, this is a landmark study that was, initiated by IHRSA, and it's a great value for all of you to have a look at and use that information.
there's some questions, and I want to answer one. I answered him. I clicked type answer, and I said I would answer it here, so the question went away. The question was, what were the 5 indicators of sadness and 5 indicators of happiness? And the way they did it, 150,000 people, 122 countries. Then they asked them if they had stress in the last day, well, an amount of worry, sadness, physical pain, or anger. Those are the 5 negative. 5 positive were, are you well rested? You get a lot of enjoyment, smiled or laughed a lot, treated with respect, learned something interesting. Those are the 5 on the happiness index.
Okay. Yep. Thanks, Blair. Bill, on your iconic brands, I saw a question, and I'm paraphrasing, but what would be some of the key takeaways from that message point for clubs specifically? What do you think they should take away from that?
Just inclusivity in imagery, in actions, in staff training. Not going with the snob appeal and, you're lucky to belong here attitude, getting away from that. If you're on the higher end spectrum, sometimes we've seen a little bit of that in our space with some of our brands. Keeping your story in bite-sized chunks and having an arc to that story so people understand why your brand is what it is. When you go to Wenatchee and see Blair's club, you get it. You get where it came from. You get how it evolved. I mean, you get it if you spend any time, in that environment with his marketing and with his team and with his experience. So thinking through that authenticity and brand position, that's the big takeaway. And looking at, people don't want to be just plastered with one-sided communication. To Sarah's point on this topic, social engagement. And likes don't necessarily translate into revenue. So making sure you're not just chasing likes, but you're chasing a real engagement.
Right.
And I really look what happened with Zumba. Like, Zumba was just inclusive beyond belief. Every shape, every size, every color. You didn't even have to speak English or speak Spanish, or Portuguese, because you don't use a microphone. You don't speak. You just move. And if you go to one of their conferences, I have never seen like neon lycra in my life. Like, it's like somebody vomited these bright colors. You express yourself. It was the most and is the most inclusive. And I see a correlation with pickleball. I know that sounds kind of stupid, but you don't need to be talented. I mean, trust me, I suck at eye-hand coordination. Max has to be my husband's child, because I just can't, that's not me. But I can play it because I used to play ping pong, or I tried badminton or whatever. Now things are inclusive and diverse and welcoming. I agree with you, Bill.
I don't know. You took that hockey puck to the nose, and few people could have accomplished that.
I don't know if that was planned or not. You didn't see my nose before the hockey puck.
Hey, Brent, there's a few questions in the Q&A section. Are you on those?
I am. Yep. If we incentivize people,
Oh, the park queue.
yeah, with their pocketbooks, we can get more moving. As far as an incentive program to get people more active, I guess was a statement they were making.
Well, that's the whole thing. Part of it is silver sneakers. It's like, get older adults moving. Who sponsored it? Who developed it? An insurance company. Because they knew if they get agers, and not even just active agers, even chair fitness people moving, the cost of wellness, the medical care will go down. So it's like kind of case in point.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's right.
Brent, look over in the Q&A out of the chat, the other Q&A. There's a couple we might want to hit on real fast.
Okay. So Anita says she agreed that health clubs are back, the bricks and mortar is going well, but she experienced an increase with online clients since COVID is back on the rise. So yeah, depending on where your country is, I think I've heard a little bit of that as well, Bill.
No, it is on the rise, and then you've got monkeypox, and so I don't think you get away from your online offerings. I think you keep that available because we've already talked about a lot of the seniors that left haven't come back yet. A lot of seniors stay, so I think that's brilliant, and I think that's right on track with what I would expect. It's just not as big as it was in the peak of COVID with regard to most of the data points we're looking at.
And is it ever going to change? I mean, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, McKinsey, they're in search for the next illness, and they're publicizing it like crazy. Whether it's, whatever the illness is, even the next flu, they're trying to do the flu vaccine that includes like COVID flu. I'm sure they're going to throw tetanus in there, and it's getting kind of crazy.
Don't forget shingles.
Real quick, because let's see, Anita Mack put in here the questions that I talked about in Gallup. She says she uses it in psychotherapy with clients with depression. The assessment is called a PHQ-9 is the assessment, evidently. So if you're interested in that, thank you, Anita.
Yeah, and with the rise of, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Well, with the rise of like life coaching, there are so many very intensive, like 2-year-long life coaching courses, or there's, like we offer a 1-day introductory life coaching or nutrition coaching. And these are getting to be more and more prevalent because people see the relationship between exercise and just general health, general wellness. And because also our medical profession doesn't supply us enough support. So people, as fitness professionals, they ask us everything, not just what we wear and how we exercise, it's how we do things, how we communicate, how we're surviving life.
All right, gang. Well, thank you all again, panelists and friends, for being here this week and volunteering your time to help everybody stay informed throughout the industry. Thanks to the audience for joining us again. Our next meeting, I guess, technically will be in the fall, next month in September. So please join us again. We'll try and make sure we have some great information to share with you then. Until then, take care. Enjoy the last parts of the summer. We'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.